It is often said that time changes a man, but the way it does so depends on the circumstances he endures. When a man goes a long time without a relationship, without the intimate connection of a romantic partner, certain psychological, emotional, and behavioral shifts begin to take place. Some of these changes strengthen him, others challenge him, but all of them shape his future interactions and perception of love and companionship. Today, I will walk you through 8 key ways a man changes the longer he has been without a relationship. When a man spends a significant amount of time without a relationship, he is forced to become his own provider, protector, and problem solver. There is no one to rely on for emotional reassurance, daily companionship, or even simple life logistics. At first, this can feel isolating. Many men who transition from a relationship to extended singleness often find themselves struggling with simple things: cooking meals for one, managing household chores without shared responsibility, or even filling the silence that once held the sound of another person's presence. But as time goes on, a transformation takes place. He begins to refine his skills, not out of necessity alone, but because self-sufficiency becomes a point of pride. He starts learning how to cook, not just basic survival meals, but dishes he enjoys, ones that nourish his body and give him control over his health. He maintains his living space, ensuring that his environment reflects his standards of order and structure. He handles finances with greater awareness, because there is no one else to split expenses with. Every decision about money is his alone to make. Take, for example, a man in his late 20s who has been single for 5 years. Initially, he relied on takeout, neglected his living space, and never paid much attention to budgeting. But as the years pass, he not only becomes skilled in cooking, but he takes joy in it, experimenting with new flavors, hosting small gatherings, and crafting meals that fit his fitness and lifestyle goals. He keeps his home in order, understanding that a clean and well-organized environment directly affects his mindset and productivity. He becomes more conscious of financial independence, setting investment goals, tracking his spending, and ensuring that he is secure without needing a partner's financial contribution. However, this shift toward complete self-sufficiency can have drawbacks. The longer a man has lived without the need for external support, the harder it becomes for him to allow someone into his world. He may struggle with the idea of letting a partner share responsibilities, as he has been conditioned to handle everything alone. Relationships at their core require interdependence, a give-and-take dynamic where both partners contribute to each other's well-being. A man who has been alone for a long time might find it unnatural to lean on someone, even when it would be beneficial. This internal struggle often manifests in the early stages of dating. If a woman offers to help with something as simple as preparing a meal or making decisions about shared plans, he might instinctively decline, not because he doesn't appreciate the gesture, but because he is wired to be self-reliant. This can sometimes make him appear distant or emotionally unavailable, when in reality, he is simply used to doing things alone. Despite these challenges, the self-sufficiency developed during long periods of singleness is a powerful asset. It ensures that when he does enter a relationship, he does so as a whole individual, not as someone seeking validation or dependence. He has built a strong foundation within himself, one that allows him to bring stability, security, and independence into any future partnership. When a man has been without a relationship for an extended period, he naturally becomes more reserved with his emotions. In relationships, emotional expression is often encouraged. Partners provide a space for vulnerability where feelings can be shared openly and support is readily available. But when that dynamic is absent, a man learns to internalize his emotions rather than express them. Initially, this may not seem like a significant change. A man may tell himself that he simply has no need to talk about his feelings. After all, if there is no one to confide in, why dwell on emotions that cannot be shared? But over time, this suppression becomes a habit. The more he keeps his struggles, fears, and even triumphs to himself, the harder it becomes to articulate them. Consider a man who has faced a major life setback. Perhaps he has lost a job, experienced a personal failure, or suffered the loss of a loved one. If he were in a relationship, he would likely turn to his partner for comfort, for reassurance, for perspective. But as a single man, he often tells himself to just deal with it. He convinces himself that strength means handling everything internally. And so he soldiers on, keeping his emotions buried beneath the surface. The problem with this approach is that emotions do not simply disappear when ignored. They manifest in different ways: stress, anger, withdrawal, or even physical symptoms like insomnia or fatigue. A man who has spent years without emotional expression may not even recognize when he is struggling because he has conditioned himself to push through without reflection. Another significant change occurs in how he perceives emotional vulnerability. In relationships, vulnerability is a bonding force. It deepens trust and intimacy. But for a man who has been alone for years, vulnerability starts to feel like a liability. He may view it as weakness, something that could be used against him or expose him to unnecessary emotional risk. This shift in perception often becomes evident when he eventually re-enters the dating world. He may struggle to open up even when he feels a connection with someone. If a woman asks him about his past relationships, his fears, or his dreams, he may deflect or keep his answers vague, not because he lacks emotions, but because he has spent so much time keeping them to himself that sharing them feels unnatural. A real-life example of this is men who have been single for a decade or more. Many of them have built successful careers, developed strong friendships, and achieved financial stability, yet they still struggle with deep emotional connections. They may attract partners who appreciate their independence and confidence, but when it comes time to engage on a deeper emotional level, they feel disconnected or hesitant. One of the biggest challenges such men face is learning to reconnect with their emotional selves. While self-sufficiency and resilience are valuable traits, the ability to express emotions in a healthy way is just as critical for long-term happiness. It requires conscious effort, sometimes even professional guidance, to break years of emotional isolation and learn to share again. That being said, the guarded nature of a long-time single man does not mean he is incapable of love or deep connection. In fact, when he does find someone who earns his trust, his emotions tend to be more intense and meaningful. He does not take emotional investment lightly. And when he finally opens up, it is with a level of sincerity and depth that is rare. However, until he reaches that point, he may find himself locked in a cycle of emotional restraint, hesitant to expose himself to potential heartache. He has survived alone for so long that letting someone in feels like an unnecessary risk. This is why many men who have been single for years either remain that way or enter relationships with a cautious, measured approach, guarded but not incapable of connection. In the end, the emotional barriers built during extended singleness can be both a strength and a challenge. They protect him from unnecessary pain, but they also make it harder for him to embrace deep intimacy. The key lies in balance, learning when to remain resilient and when to allow vulnerability as a necessary part of meaningful relationships. When a man has been without a relationship for a long time, he no longer approaches dating in the same way he once did. He becomes more intentional about whom he allows into his life. At first, this shift is subtle. He simply recognizes red flags more quickly, or he notices when a relationship feels forced. But as time passes, his standards refine even further. He is no longer willing to compromise on the things that truly matter to him. And this makes him highly selective when considering a potential partner. In his younger years or in past relationships, he may have tolerated behavior that was misaligned with his values. Perhaps he ignored certain toxic traits, made excuses for a partner's immaturity, or stayed in a relationship out of fear of being alone. But after years of independence, he no longer operates from a place of neediness. He has learned that being single is not a failure. In fact, it has provided him with the time and space to work on himself, develop his ambitions, and create a life that is fulfilling on its own. This means he will not enter a relationship unless it genuinely adds value to his life. Consider a man who has been single for 6 or 7 years. Over that time, he has built a successful career, developed hobbies he is passionate about, and cultivated a close-knit group of friends. His time has become precious to him. If he goes on a date and senses that a woman lacks emotional maturity, shares little intellectual depth, or introduces unnecessary drama into his life, he will not entertain the idea of pursuing something further. He has no desire to enter a relationship simply for companionship. He is perfectly fine on his own. This selectiveness is both a strength and a challenge. On the one hand, it ensures that when he does choose to be with someone, it is for the right reasons. He is not settling out of loneliness, social pressure, or convenience. Instead, he is seeking a partner who aligns with his values, vision, and lifestyle. This leads to stronger, healthier, and more meaningful relationships. However, the downside is that extreme selectiveness can make dating difficult. Some men who have been single for many years unknowingly create an unattainable standard, expecting perfection, rejecting potential partners too quickly, or dismissing someone at the first sign of imperfection. While high standards are important, unrealistic expectations can lead to perpetual singleness, where no one is ever good enough. A real-world example of this can be seen in high-achieving men who have focused on their careers for years. They may have developed a strong sense of discipline, structure, and ambition, and they expect the same from a partner. When they meet someone who is kind and caring but lacks that same level of discipline or drive, they may reject them without considering the complementary strengths they bring. Ultimately, a man who has been without a relationship for a long time does not rush into love. He carefully evaluates potential partners, ensuring that any relationship he enters is built on shared values and long-term compatibility, extended periods of singleness. Force a man to confront himself in ways that relationships do not. Without the distractions of a romantic partner, he spends more time alone with his thoughts, reflecting on his past, his purpose, and his identity. This self-exploration leads to a deeper understanding of who he is and what he truly wants out of life. In relationships, people often compromise or adapt to their partner's preferences, sometimes without even realizing it. A man may take on certain habits, interests, or even personality traits that are influenced by the person he is with. But when he is single for a long time, he is left to develop his identity without external influence. For instance, a man who was in a relationship for many years may have gone to social events or engaged in activities primarily because his partner enjoyed them. But after years of being single, he begins to ask himself, do I actually enjoy this, or was I just doing it for someone else? This level of introspection allows him to redefine his interests, hobbies, and even his social circle. One significant transformation that often occurs is an increased awareness of personal flaws and emotional triggers. In a relationship, it is easy to attribute conflicts to the other person, blaming a partner for arguments, frustrations, or misunderstandings. But when a man is alone, he is forced to confront the patterns in his own thinking and behavior. He begins to recognize his strengths and weaknesses without external validation or blame. A powerful example of this is a man who, after years of being single, realizes that his previous relationships failed, not because of his partners, but because of his own emotional insecurities. Perhaps he had a tendency to withdraw during conflict rather than communicate. Maybe he struggled with trust, pushing people away before they could hurt him. Without the distractions of a relationship, he begins to do the inner work required to heal these patterns, whether through self-education, therapy, or simply deep reflection. This self-awareness extends to his long-term goals as well. A man who has spent years alone has had time to think about what he truly wants from life, not just in relationships, but in his career, lifestyle, and personal growth. He becomes clearer on his values, understanding what kind of partner would complement his journey rather than distract from it. For example, a man who has dedicated himself to his passion for travel and adventure might realize that he cannot be with someone who prefers routine and stability. Or a man who has spent years building a disciplined fitness routine may understand that he needs a partner who values health and wellness. This clarity prevents him from entering relationships that are fundamentally misaligned with his vision for the future. However, just like with selectiveness, deep self-awareness can come with challenges. Some men become so introspective that they overanalyze relationships before they even begin. They question every potential flaw in a partner, overthink compatibility, and sometimes hesitate to take emotional risks. This can lead to a form of paralysis by analysis, where they are so focused on making the perfect choice that they miss out on meaningful experiences. Another potential downside is that deep self-awareness can make it harder to relate to others. A man who has spent years cultivating his inner world, reading, learning, reflecting, may find it difficult to connect with people who have not gone through a similar journey of self-discovery. Conversations that once felt engaging might now seem superficial, and he may struggle to find someone who matches his level of introspection. Despite these challenges, the ability to deeply understand oneself is one of the greatest gifts of prolonged singleness. When a man truly knows who he is, what he wants, and what he values, he brings a level of confidence and authenticity into any future relationship. He is not seeking a partner to fill a void or complete him. He is seeking someone who aligns with the strong, independent life he has already built. This depth of self-awareness ultimately ensures that when he does choose to enter a relationship, it is not based on external pressures, fleeting attraction, or societal expectations. It is a conscious, well-thought-out decision, rooted in clarity, self-respect, and a deep understanding of what truly matters to him. A man who has been without a relationship for a long time inevitably develops a greater sense of emotional resilience. This is not just about learning to be alone, it is about facing life's challenges without the emotional support that often comes from a romantic partner. Over time, he becomes his own source of strength, learning to navigate difficulties with self-reliance rather than seeking comfort or validation from someone else. At the start of his period of singleness, he might feel the weight of loneliness more acutely, the absence of a partner to share daily struggles with, whether it be a stressful work situation, a family issue, or personal setbacks, can feel overwhelming. But as time passes, he realizes something profound. He is capable of handling hardship on his own. He does not need someone else to pick up the pieces when things fall apart. He builds his own coping mechanisms, and in doing so, he becomes stronger than he ever thought possible. Consider a man who goes through financial struggles. If he had a partner, he might lean on them emotionally, perhaps even financially during tough times. But being alone forces him to take full ownership of his circumstances. He learns to budget more efficiently, develops a stronger work ethic, and finds solutions instead of looking for an escape. This process makes him resilient, not just in finances, but in all areas of life. Emotional resilience is also built through dealing with rejection and disappointment on his own. In relationships, there is often an unspoken safety net, someone to reassure him when he fails, to encourage him when he doubts himself. Without that, he must learn to be his own source of encouragement. He learns to pick himself up after failure, to push forward even when he feels uncertain, and to keep going despite setbacks. For example, imagine a man who loses his job. If he were in a relationship, his partner might be there to provide emotional support, reminding him of his worth and encouraging him to keep searching. But if he is single, he has to dig deep and find that motivation within himself. He cannot afford to wallow in self-pity. He must get up, rework his resume, sharpen his skills, and push forward. This kind of experience teaches him not just how to survive, but how to thrive under pressure. Another key aspect of emotional resilience is the ability to manage emotions without relying on external validation. Many people use relationships as a way to regulate their emotions, seeking love and affection to soothe their insecurities or relying on a partner's attention to feel valued. But a man who has been single for years has had to learn how to manage his emotions independently. He develops a deeper sense of self-worth that is not tied to whether or not someone else loves him. This also means he becomes less reactive to emotional highs and lows. When a man is constantly surrounded by relationships, he may experience extreme emotional fluctuations, intense passion, deep heartbreak, periods of uncertainty, but over time, being alone teaches him to find emotional balance. He no longer feels the need to chase fleeting excitement, nor does he fall apart when faced with difficulties. Instead, he maintains a steady, composed mindset, making decisions from a place of stability rather than emotional impulsivity. This emotional resilience does not just benefit him, it also makes him a stronger partner when he eventually does enter a relationship. Instead of expecting someone else to fix his problems, he brings emotional stability to the table. He does not create unnecessary drama, he does not crumble under pressure, and he does not look for validation from his partner. Instead, he provides a steady presence, offering emotional strength rather than emotional dependence. One of the most profound realizations a man has after years of being single is the difference between loneliness and solitude. At first, the two may seem identical. Both involve being alone, both can feel isolating, and both can create a deep longing for companionship. But as time passes, he begins to understand that solitude is not the enemy. Loneliness is. Loneliness is a feeling of emptiness, a desperate craving for connection, a sense that something is missing. It often leads people to seek relationships for the wrong reasons, to fill a void, to escape discomfort, or to avoid confronting their inner struggles. But solitude, on the other hand, is a choice. It is the ability to be alone without feeling alone. It is the realization that one's own company is enough. At the beginning of his single years, a man might struggle with loneliness. He might feel restless, constantly seeking distraction, social media, casual relationships, or excessive work, to avoid facing himself. But over time, as he embraces solitude, he discovers something unexpected: peace. Consider a man who spends a weekend alone in a cabin, away from distractions, away from the noise of everyday life. At first, the silence is uncomfortable. He reaches for his phone, feeling the urge to text someone, to scroll, to do anything but sit with his thoughts. But then, as he allows himself to settle into the solitude, he begins to notice things. His thoughts become clearer, his mind slows down, and a sense of calm washes over him. He is not lonely. He is present. This shift in perspective changes everything. Instead of dreading alone time, he begins to cherish it. He develops hobbies that do not require anyone else: writing, painting, hiking, reading. He enjoys quiet evenings alone, not because he has no one to be with, but because he genuinely enjoys his own company. Many great minds throughout history have understood the power of solitude. Think of philosophers, writers, and artists who spent long periods alone, using solitude to think deeply, create, and grow. A man who embraces solitude rather than running from it taps into this same power. He learns to reflect, to understand himself, and to develop a level of self-sufficiency that few people ever reach. Of course, this does not mean he no longer desires companionship, but the difference is that he no longer seeks it out of desperation. He does not enter relationships because he is afraid of being alone. He enters them because he genuinely wants to share his life with someone. A man who has mastered solitude is a man who is no longer controlled by the fear of loneliness. He does not stay in toxic relationships because he fears being single. He does not chase validation from others. He does not make impulsive romantic choices just to avoid spending another night alone. Instead, he is patient, waiting for a relationship that is truly meaningful rather than one that is merely convenient. Ultimately, learning the difference between loneliness and solitude transforms a man's outlook on life. He no longer feels the need to constantly be around others to feel fulfilled. He understands that relationships are not about escaping oneself, but about sharing the best version of oneself with another. And when the right person does come along, he is ready, not because he needs them, but because he has already built a life worth sharing. A man who has been without a relationship for a long time often develops a heightened sense of discipline and a stronger drive toward his purpose. Without the distractions that come with maintaining a romantic relationship, he redirects his energy toward self-improvement, career ambitions, and personal growth. Over time, this discipline becomes an integral part of his identity, shaping him into a more focused and goal-oriented individual. At the beginning of his single period, he may experience a sense of restlessness. Without a partner to share his time with, he might feel unmoored, uncertain of how to structure his days. However, as he adapts to his independence, he begins to realize that he has a rare opportunity. He can devote himself entirely to his ambitions without compromise. Consider a man who once spent his evenings on dates or engaging in relationship maintenance, texting, calling, planning activities. Now that time is his own. He starts hitting the gym more consistently, not just to impress someone, but because he values his health and well-being. He dedicates more hours to his work, not because he has to, but because he genuinely wants to build something meaningful. He picks up new skills, reads more, and refines his craft. This discipline extends beyond career and physical fitness. It affects his entire mindset. Without the emotional ups and downs of a relationship, he becomes more consistent in his habits. He wakes up earlier, follows a structured routine, and eliminates distractions. His focus sharpens, and he finds himself making steady progress toward his long-term goals. One clear example of this transformation is seen in men who start businesses. Many of the most successful entrepreneurs spent long periods of their lives single, pouring their energy into building something great. When a man is alone, he has the freedom to work late nights, take risks, and fully commit to his vision without the compromises that relationships often require. The absence of romantic validation also forces him to develop internal motivation. In a relationship, it is easy to seek approval from a partner, doing things to impress them, to gain their admiration, or to meet their expectations. But when he is single, he must find a deeper reason to push himself forward. He learns to set goals for his own fulfillment rather than for external validation. This self-discipline eventually becomes one of his greatest assets. Whether he remains single or enters a relationship in the future, he has built a foundation of personal excellence. He does not become complacent, nor does he rely on a partner to keep him accountable. Instead, he holds himself to a high standard, and that makes him not only more successful, but also more attractive to potential partners. A disciplined man commands respect, not just from others, but from himself. He walks with confidence, knowing that he is in control of his life. He does not waste time on meaningless distractions or fleeting pleasures. Instead, he invests in his future, steadily climbing toward the man he is meant to be. After spending a long time without a relationship, a man often develops a clearer sense of what he truly wants in a partner. He has had time to reflect, to grow, and to understand himself on a deeper level. Because of this, he no longer settles for relationships that do not align with his values, his goals, or his vision for life. When a man is young or inexperienced in relationships, he might enter them based on infatuation, loneliness, or external pressure. He may have tolerated toxic behaviors, overlooked red flags, or compromised his own needs just to be with someone. However, after spending years alone, he gains a different perspective. He realizes that being single is not a curse, it is an opportunity. And with that understanding comes the power to be selective. A man who has spent a long time without a relationship has learned to enjoy his own company. He has built a fulfilling life, one that does not depend on a romantic partner for happiness. Because of this, he no longer feels desperate to be in a relationship. He does not chase after women who do not value him, nor does he lower his standards just to avoid being alone. Think of a man who, after years of singleness, has built a thriving career, developed strong friendships, and pursued his passions. He is not looking for just anyone. He is looking for someone who genuinely adds value to his life. He does not seek relationships for validation or out of loneliness. He seeks them because he has something worth sharing and expects the same in return. This shift in mindset prevents him from making impulsive emotional decisions. He takes his time in relationships, observing carefully before committing. He asks deeper questions. Does this person align with my long-term goals? Do they bring peace or chaos into my life? Do they support my ambitions or do they hold me back? Are they emotionally mature and capable of genuine connection? Many men who have spent years single report that when they finally do enter a relationship, it is of a much higher quality than their past ones. Because they have taken the time to grow as individuals, they attract partners who have done the same. Instead of falling into relationships by chance, they enter them by choice. This also means they are not easily manipulated. Inexperienced men often fall into relationships with people who do not truly respect or appreciate them. They tolerate drama, dishonesty, or emotional games because they fear losing the relationship. But a man who has been single for years knows he can walk away. He has faced loneliness before, and he has come out stronger. He is not afraid to leave a situation that does not serve him. A powerful example of this can be seen in older, successful men who remain single for long periods before finally settling down. These men often take their time because they understand the weight of commitment. They are not impressed by superficial qualities. They seek depth, character, and compatibility. And when they do find the right partner, their relationships are built on a foundation of mutual respect, not desperation. Raising one's standards does not mean being unrealistic or impossible to please. It simply means knowing one's worth and refusing to accept anything less than a relationship that is genuinely fulfilling. A man who has been single for a long time has done the hard work of self-discovery. He understands himself, his values, and his goals. And because of that, he will not settle for a partner who does not align with the life he has built. In the end, this level of self-respect leads to healthier, stronger relationships. When a man finally meets someone who is truly right for him, he enters the relationship as a whole, confident individual, not as someone searching for completion. This difference changes everything. It transforms love from a source of neediness into a source of strength. And that in itself is one of the most valuable things a man can gain from his time alone. A man who has been single for an extended period is not broken, nor is he incomplete. He is forged by solitude, sharpened by independence, and strengthened by self-awareness. When he does choose love, he does so from a place of strength, not desperation. So if you are that man, embrace this time. Use it to grow, to build, to understand yourself. Because when the right person does come along, you won't be searching for completion, you'll already be whole.